Hey there, and welcome to Edit My Photo for June 2021. This image submitted by Sherry has a ton of potential. It's sharp, well-focused and well-composed, but it needs a creative edit to really bring it to life. Feel free to follow along from start to finish or fast track through the tutorial using the chapter links down below. And as always, if you like the video, please subscribe to this channel for more pet photography, shooting and editing tips and tricks. Hi, I'm Charlotte Reeves from Unleashed Education, and you've tuned into another episode of Edit My Photo. We run these editing challenges in the Unleashed Education membership. The challenge runs monthly and goes through a few different stages. Firstly, I submit one of my raw images for members to download and edit. I actually handed over 2 raw files for this one. This was not an easy edit, requiring some decent Photoshop skills to complete. The first image is a great shot of May, the chocolate Labrador retriever, and the second image, Luna, the flat-coated retriever, has a much better head position and expression. The mission was to combine these 2 images to create one perfect double trouble dog portrait. I was blown away with how many people entered this one. 39 was a new record. I was also super impressed with how many submissions were entirely believable. Not only did they successfully combine the 2 images, but they also paid attention to the rest of the edit, enhancing the warmth in the background and bringing out the color and texture in the dog's fur. Out of all the submissions, I chose Sherry's edit because firstly, the merge of the 2 images has been done perfectly. Nothing gives away that this was a composite. Secondly, I love the editing treatment, the super warm background, the subtle editing of the dog's fur texture and color, the inclusion of the rail on the right for a little bit more context, and the fact that the fine chains have been left in the image almost like jewelry. Sherry did such a beautiful job of this edit. In the second stage of the challenge, the winner of the challenge gets to submit an image for me to edit, and Sherry submitted this raw image right here. This image is nicely shot and has a lot of potential. After correcting the white balance and the tones, I'm going to be using Lightroom's local adjustments to edit selected areas of the image to bring more attention to the dog and give the image a cooler feel overall. Make sure you watch all the way to the end so you can see the finished result. And as always, I welcome your questions and feedback in the comments. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom with Sherry's image. As you can see, the raw file is a little bit underexposed, a little bit warm on the color temperature side of things. You can see on the histogram here, most of the tones are clustered towards the bottom end of the histogram, which is towards the shadows and the dark kind of tones. And there isn't really a lot of information the right hand side of the histogram, which is the highlights and whites end of the histogram. So one of the things we're going to be doing in this edit is to maybe get rid of some of that warmth. I feel like it's a little bit, I do love warmth, but I feel like it's a little bit too warm. And we're also going to be brightening the image up a little bit more. Now, here's a little secret. I have actually already edited this one. So we're kind of going to do this one back to front. So we're going to go and have a look at the edits that I've made in Lightroom and have a look at the settings that I've used and discuss them as we go. So I've created a few snapshots over here that we can go through. So basically what this edit is comprised of, and I've done all of it in Lightroom so far. I've done global adjustments and then I've done some local adjustments as well. I've done radial adjustments, I've used the adjustment brush, and I've also used graduated filters. So let's go through everything step by step. So first of all, I did global adjustments. So if you have a look over here, I've definitely taken that temperature towards the blue end. As you can see, the temperature before was definitely very different. So I've definitely cooled this image down a lot. I feel like it was kind of shot in the shade. There's a bit of light coming through from behind, so it's slightly backlit, but I feel like the image, it wants to be a little bit cooler. So that's what I've gone with the look of that. Exposure, I've adjusted a little bit, contrast up a little bit. I've brought the highlights down. I've taken the shadows quite a long way up to try and get some more light back into those dark areas. I've taken the whites up, and that's helped to increase contrast because it's brought those white tones up to the right hand end of the histogram rather than there being kind of nothing up there. As you can see, there was before. So if you have a look at the difference in histogram between the raw file and then the global adjustments, you see how those tones have been neutralized and kind of spread up towards the right hand end of the histogram, which kind of shows that the image has been lightened quite a lot. So what else have I done? I've taken the blacks down. I've taken the clarity and the vibrance up just a little bit. Saturation wise, I did feel like there was still quite a bit of saturation lurking around in there. So I've actually taken the saturation of the orange and the yellow down a little bit, and also blue and purple. There were a few tones in the background that were creeping through that I didn't really want. So that's helped to deal with those ones. So aside from that, I really haven't done anything else at all. The ISO was already quite low, 320, so I haven't added any noise reduction or sharpening to the image because I felt like it just didn't really need it. And all the rest of the adjustments we're actually going to do locally to the image, so not globally. So the next step in the edit was radial adjustments. So as you can see, quite a big difference made by adding radial adjustment. So let's have a look and see what I added. So I'm going to click the radial adjustment tool over here, and you can see 4 little pins have popped up. Let's have a look at those. So the first one is the background. I wanted to bring some real sort of cool, more neutral tones, I guess, through from the background. I've taken the dehaze slider to the left, so I've dehazed it, which actually introduces haze. And that's pretty much all I did with that little one there. So for this one here, you can actually see I've added the radial adjustment, but I've then gone in and used the brush to erase, and I've actually erased it off the head of the dog. I've got it a little bit on the back end of the dog because that kind of makes sense from a light point of view. If you've got light coming from behind, it makes sense that there is some light hitting the back areas of the dog, but I didn't want any of that light to spill over onto the dog's face, so I've brushed that off the face. So what else have we got here? So this is another adjustment that's applying just to the background. It's a lot bigger. The contrast has been taken a long way down. I've taken the temperature down quite a bit. I've taken the clarity down, so that has helped with, let me just turn that overlay off so you can see, that has actually helped with making the background a lot creamier and a lot softer. It was shot at f1.8, so it was shot wide open with this 135mm lens, so it does have a pretty shallow depth of field, but just to enhance that further. I've also taken the dehaze slider a bit to the left, texture a little bit to the left. The dehaze again introduces haze. And I've also taken the saturation down a little bit because there was some sort of colors creeping through from the background that I didn't really want there. So taking that saturation down has helped a little bit with that. Oh, and also for that one there, you can see I've definitely brushed it off the dog, but I've only brushed it off the front of the dog because that's what makes sense to me, because that side, the side you're looking at is the side that's in shade. It's not getting any of this light coming from behind. So this one here is predominantly to try and lighten the shadows of the dog a little bit. So I've taken the shadows right up, as you can see. I've taken the highlights down because it was starting to just sort of lose detail in these highlight bits on the top of the dog there, and I didn't want that. So I took those highlights down just a touch. Because we're dealing with fur and I want to bring out texture and contrast, I've taken the texture and the clarity up a little bit, and that's all I've done for that one there. There's also another one here, and this is another background adjustment. This one here acts as a custom vignette. So what it's really doing is darkening around the edges and also reducing the contrast further. So when you think about image flow and what your eye rests on in the image, your eye is drawn to things that are sharp, things that are bright, and things that are highly detailed. So if you can remove those aspects from other parts of the image and then add or enhance them in your subject, it means the viewer, when they're looking at your image, is concentrating on the main subject. They're not getting distracted by anything else in the image. So they are all the radial adjustments. Basically, there's 3 for the background, 1 for the dog. Let's go on and look at the adjustment brush next. Okay, so when we move from the radial adjustment stage to the adjustment brush stage, the only real thing that you can notice here is I've done a little bit of work to the dog. So let's have a look at what adjustments I've made there. So here's the edit pin for that one, and as you can see, I've just brushed that on where I wanted it. So I haven't messed with the temperature of this at all. So I've taken the exposure up a little because I really want to make the dog the brightest part of the image. I've actually taken the contrast down a little bit because I felt that there was too much contrast in there. There's a lot of fur detail and a lot of shadowing going on, and I wasn't really a fan of that. So I've taken that contrast slider down just a little. I've taken the white slider up, so that's helped to bring out those brighter tones. And then I've also taken the saturation down. I felt like the dog was just a little bit too yellow and a little bit too oversaturated. So taking that saturation slider down has really helped with that. And that's pretty much it for the adjustment brush. There was just one adjustment brush used in this edit. Let's go on to the final stage, which is using the graduated filter. So moving on to the graduated filter, you can instantly see what I've done here. So let's take a closer look at these ones. So as you can see, I've used 3. So we've got one that has been brought in from the side. So graduated filters is basically a gradient. So if you have a look at the mask here, you can see the effect will be stronger, the overlay of red is darker, and the effect reduces in a linear fashion. When you can see that sort of this area here, the effect isn't applying that much. So what is this effect that we've applied? Mainly it's exposure on contrast. So contrast, again, I've wanted to take that down because the eye is attracted to areas of high contrast. Therefore, I want to reduce the contrast around the edges. And exposure because I just really want to darken that area. Let's have a look over here. All right, so this one kind of comes in from like the top right sort of area. Again, exposure down, contrast down, and I've actually taken clarity down here a little bit too because there's some sort of busy stuff going on in the background that I was hoping to kind of soften up a little bit. I've also taken the saturation down for the same reason there. And then we have one last one, which kind of comes up from the more like the bottom right. Again, exposure, contrast, and saturation down. So that's basically the final stage, the final lot of local adjustments that I've done in Lightroom. So let's just go through those again super quickly, just as a little recap. So this was the raw image that we started off with. Very warm, a little bit underexposed. After the global adjustments, I fixed up the warmth and the underexposure, but the image kind of still lacks a little bit, I feel. So I decided to do a little bit of painting with light. First, I added some radial adjustments, so really kind of giving a flary kind of look to the background. Used the adjustment brush to bring a bit more light into this side of the dog. And then finally used a few graduated filters to darken the edges, and that's basically it. So let's take this image into Photoshop now and we'll quickly finish it off. So here we are in Photoshop with this image here. Now we've done quite a lot of work to this image in Lightroom already, so we don't really need to do a lot, but there's just a few little tasks that I'd like to do to finish this image off nicely. So the first thing is removing this harness. I feel like it doesn't really add to the story. It's a bit of a distraction, so it's got to go. There's a bunch of leaves on this mossy log. I love the mossy log, don't so much love the leaves. So I'm just going to do a little bit of leaf removal. And the main technique I'm going to use here is selection and then content aware fill. Now, sometimes when you try to use content aware fill along the edge of something, it just decides to kind of put that in there, and I don't know why it does that. Then also if you try and patch it, it also kind of just blends it, which is a real pain in the butt actually. So sometimes fiddling around with these structure and color settings can help with that. It's not too bad, but I still feel it's kind of blended in there. So let's go back a few steps. And instead, what I'm going to do, so we've got a selection made here already. I'm going to expand that selection a little bit to start with. So I'm just going to switch to the lasso tool. I just pressed L on the keyboard and I'm going to add to this selection. Bear with me, there's a method in my madness. And then I'm going to take away a little bit from the top here. And then I'm going to select modify feather. I'm going to feather the edge by like 2 pixels, or maybe more actually, because it's a pretty soft edge. Let's go 4 pixels. Then I'm going to switch to the clone stamp tool, and I'm actually going to clone stamp sample from out here and clone stamp over here. And because it will only clone stamp inside the selection, it means we're not going to bleed out over the edge of the selection. So let me show you. So I'm sampling from out here, and then I'm actually sample from there, and then I'm going to clone stamp and see how, zoom in a little bit, see how I'm clone stamping, but it's not going over the lines. So it's not going outside the selection that I've made. Even though I can sample from outside the selection, it's not going any further. So that gives me a much better edge. Do that here. There we go. So now I can deselect that, and that's actually looking pretty good along there. So a couple of little bits to fix up here, and that's kind of gotten rid of some of that leaf that was sort of sticking up that I didn't like the look of. So I'm just going to do some more cleaning up now. Okay, so obviously I can't get rid of all the leaves because there's just way too many of them, so we have to deal with some of them. That's okay, I'm over the leaves. Alright, so I'm going to flatten that one. And last thing I'm going to do is just go in here and tidy up this dog's little furry face. So you probably saw there I went in and removed all those little bits of hair over the dog's eye. I was basically using the spot healing brush tool and just drawing along the hair. That does a pretty good job usually. So finally, I'm just going to grab the dodge tool. I like to use the dodge tool. And it's set to mid-tones and exposure and also protect tones. And I'm just going to run over the dog again a little bit. So the dog is definitely the brightest, warmest, most detailed thing in the image now, which I think really helps to bring attention to it. So that's it. That's my final edit of Sherry's image. So the last thing to do is to take it into Lightroom and do a final crop. Okay, so here we are back in Lightroom. This was the version that we exported to Photoshop. And this is the version that we've brought back into Lightroom after editing in Photoshop. So it's just a little bit cleaner. So cropping wise, I quite like the composition of this image already, I must say. I really like the fact that the dog's body is curved towards and the dog is actually looking towards the left-hand side. I think that works really well. I'm just going to tighten this up just a touch, just to make it even better. So I've used those trees in the background as a straightening guide. So to make sure it looks nice and straight. I want to keep the dog's eyes on that top third line because this is a very sort of negative space rule of thirds style of composition. And I think I quite like that as the final crop, because I think lining this up on the left hand side with this darker area really helps to stop your attention going out to the left, keeps it bouncing back in towards the dog, which I think works really well from an image flow perspective. So thanks for coming along with me on the ride for this one. Sherry, I hope you like your edit, and let's take a look at the before and afters. Catch you next time. Bye. Hi, me again. If you're wondering how you can get involved in these challenges, it's easy. You just need to be a member of Unleashed Education, a pet photography education membership created by myself, Charlotte Reeves, and fellow pet photographer extraordinaire, Craig Turner-Bullock. Between us, we have 34 years of experience as professional pet photographers. Along with this monthly Edit My Photo challenge, the membership includes access to our premium pet photography courses, educational videos, ebooks, guest artist videos, editing tutorials, 3 monthly live calls, and of course a private members-only Facebook group. Through the membership, Craig and I share all of our best shooting and editing education, no holds barred. Everything you need to become a better pet photographer, plus stacks of inspiration packaged up in a great little community. Craig and I would love to have you join us in the membership. If you'd like to find out more, check out the link in the description.